It's taking a lot of willpower to not do this. Oh, Vaughn, you're bad. Hey everybody, I'm Vaughn. Over the next couple days, I'm going to make probably like 10 different batches of brownies based off of this easy brownie recipe from Mark Bittman. It's got 5 stars and nearly 4,000 reviews. What's really cool about this recipe, not only is it super simple, but it also has a ton of cooking notes from users like you all. So what I'm here to do today is I'm gonna bake off this brownie recipe as intended, and then I'm gonna delve into the notes a little bit, and I'm gonna see what kind of comments you guys are suggesting, things to add, things to take away, things that you might have done differently. Ultimately in the hopes of finding out what my perfect version of that recipe is. This is Cooking the Comments. Brownies usually fall into 2 camps, right? You have your like fudgy and you've got your cakey. Cakey, immediate jail. But I don't want the brownie to get stuck in my teeth. A brownie is not fudge. The perfect brownie to me is something that is moist, dare I say it. I think that a brownie should be extremely chocolatey. Like I want my brownies to be chock full of chocolate. The thing that I'm looking for is something that's just really perfectly balanced, something that's gonna be really crowd pleasing, whether you like a fudgy brownie or a cakey brownie. My goal is to create a brownie that brings the people together. A brownie at its core should not be complicated. Depending on how many you're making, I think you should have a brownie on your table in less than an hour. Maybe an hour and a half, because they need to cool a little bit. I think brownies are universally pretty beloved, but the people who make them are also universally beloved. I love how simple this recipe seems. It's truly just melting chocolate and butter. You're adding your eggs, maybe some salt and vanilla, and then you are adding your flour and you're baking it. So I have some unsweetened chocolate right here. In this recipe, it uses a whole bar. This is baked in an 8x8 square. I think it makes 12 brownies. So I'm gonna set this off to the side. I'm gonna chop my chocolate. Just try to get it as uniformly chopped as possible. You'll obviously have some little shavings there, but just want it to melt pretty evenly. I'm working over a very low flame, which is good because we don't want the chocolate to do something called seizing up. You're either doing it in a microwave a lot of the time, or you're doing it over a double boiler. I'm gonna stir pretty occasionally at the beginning just to kind of distribute that heat. You can see it's already starting to melt nicely. While that continues to melt just really gently, I'm going to grease my pan. I'm just using your best tools, your hands. So I've got 2 pieces of parchment here that I'm going to lay down, and I'm gonna get all the air bubbles out as much as possible and really just press it in there. I'm gonna light grease on top of this, and then I'm gonna go in over top here with this one. And this is also gonna just help us make sure that we release the brownies really well. Well, I think we're greased up like a pig at the county fair. So now, this isn't necessarily like Melissa's like 1 bowl brownie, but you could in theory probably just make it all in a pot. So I'm going to add the sugar. And this is a good amount of sugar, but we did use unsweetened chocolate. At this point also the chocolate mixture, because I let that residual heat continue to cook it and kind of took it off the heat, it's not as hot as it once was, which is good for when we add the eggs. The sugar's also kind of helping temper that down a little bit more, but you wanna make sure that you don't cook your eggs. Beat those in one at a time. I wanna make sure that I really get these eggs incorporated. I feel like especially in a brownie recipe that doesn't call for any chemical leavening, eggs are gonna provide a lot of that structure. So I'm gonna add the flour now. You can see that this mixture is already really smoothed out. And this is not a lot of flour. I think that that was something that Mark wrote in the top note is use a minimal amount of flour, a minimal amount of mixing, no chemical leavening, and you'll end up with some really nice brownies. I'm also gonna add vanilla, if you're using it, and then a pinch of salt. And then I'm just gonna gently kind of fold this in. Now, just transfer to the pan. I've got my oven preheated at 350. So now I'm just gonna smooth this into the corners there. I get like a pretty even layer. and I'm gonna put it in the oven. I'm gonna check on it about 20 minutes in. It bakes for about 20 to 30, but there's nothing worse than an overbaked brownie. It's been about 20 minutes. I'm gonna check on them. They're probably gonna be good. Like I said, I kinda wanna err on the side of like just barely baked. They will continue baking even once I pull them from the hot oven. Oh yeah. And the doneness cues that Mark gives in the recipe, the edges are firm and they're barely set in the middle. I mean, these do not have that like hallmark, shiny, crackly top. This is the easy brownie recipe by Mark Bittman. They look really dense. They look very moist. I think that this is a really good starter recipe for brownies for sure. Like it was so simple. They're a little sweet for me. I kind of want a little bit more chocolatey. They're definitely like a fudgy brownie. It kind of crumbles like, you know, your Christmas fudge. The payoff to the amount of effort put into these brownies is fantastic. So I think this is kind of like the perfect after school brownie. These are a very highly regarded brownie. So I'm really excited to see what people will say in the comments. You know, I think that that's kind of the beauty of a brownie too, is you can really take it wherever you want. I'm gonna read the first one, which is Marmo. I am 12 and I made it myself with absolutely no difficulty. The instructions are clear and to the point. I hope this is helpful. What an icon. I am obsessed with Marmo. My favorite fisherman and I think this recipe yields the best brownies ever. Recipe lends itself to experimentation, which, if you like to bake, makes it super fun to use. Use 4 ounces of unsweetened chocolate, a bit less sugar, fluff the eggs before adding. Lots of good ideas in the comments for the next batch. That's like truly exactly what I'm after. You know, it's people who say recipe lends itself to experimentation, which if you like to bake, makes it super fun to use. And I think that's such a perfect comment. Sharon made these and added cayenne pepper, just a pinch, and espresso coffee. Absolutely delicious, and I don't like spicy. Well, why'd you add cayenne, Sharon? I fear I'm going to be singing Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter for the rest of the day. I'm working late, cause I'm a singer. A lot of people are saying cake flour. Kevin says the same recipe found in another book, but calls for 3/4 cup cake flour instead of all-purpose flour. Cake flour tends to yield a little bit more of a tender result. It's got less gluten than all-purpose or bread flour, so it's going to be a little bit more delicate. Coconut oil, add walnuts, added some cocoa powder, more chocolate, you know, fluff the eggs. I think that that's another thing that's interesting. A lot of brownie recipes that I've made and that I've actually worked on developing call for more structure through actually, you know, beating the eggs with the sugar. I haven't even read this comment, but I like this person. Florida Deadhead. Made this recipe as written a few times and it was great. I added chocolate chips and pretzel pieces before. Oh, Florida Deadhead, you crazy. When I made a few adjustments, I couldn't believe how good these were. I used half a cup of white, half a cup of light brown sugar, which I love that. I do think that brown sugar adds a little bit more depth and complements the chocolate better than white sugar alone. Also, combine the eggs and sugar separately and beat together for several minutes. Gently fold in the chocolate mixture and then the flour mixture as to not deflate or create gluten. Wow. I think this is me in 20 years. I think I'm gonna kind of approach this from 2 different angles. I think a flavor angle and a texture angle. Cool. Let's get started. I'm gonna start with my flavor tests, which will include espresso powder, regular cocoa, and then Dutch processed cocoa. I'm probably gonna add about a 1/4 cup of cocoa to each of these. It may make it a little dry, but flavor-wise, I wanna see where that takes us. So I've got my chocolate anise out here. I'm just gonna do basically everything the exact same way for this first test, which is for that's that Mi Espresso. In the warm chocolate, it'll kind of bloom in there too. It's not gonna make it taste like coffee. It just will really enhance the chocolate flavor that's already there. Are you ready for this? gorgeous. The espresso gonna go in for about 20 minutes. We'll see how it does. On to test 2. So this one I'm gonna try just very standard cocoa powder that you would find in most grocery stores. 100% cacao. It is not Dutch process. I think I'm gonna add the cocoa to the dry ingredients. Okay, I can already tell this one looks darker. This is more like the consistency of the first one. This is my cocoa powder test number 1 going in, and the timer just went off for my espresso, so I'm gonna take those out. Now we're gonna go with the final flavor test, which is the Dutch process cocoa. Dutch process has obviously something to do with the processing of the cocoa. I find that when I use Dutch process, it just is more chocolatey. This is visibly a lot darker. And honestly, spreading a lot smoother than all the other ones too. Easy. These are the tests that I'm doing to see how certain things might affect the texture. So the first one that I'm going to do is with 3 eggs rather than 2. Seeing what that change in volume actually does, a lot of commenters noted this. I don't think it's there to make it cakier, I think it's there to just actually lend the structure from the whites and the protein bonds, and then also the fat from the yolk. And then I'm gonna actually whip the eggs with the sugar before adding the chocolate and butter mixture. That's the same amount of eggs as the original recipe too, but I'm gonna try that different technique to see what that yields for me. And then I'm gonna try a mixture of half brown, half white sugar. Really, I think the moisture in that will help the texture. And then I have one test that I'm gonna do with cake flour, which is lower protein content. It will typically yield something a little bit more tender. Last test of today. Oh yeah. Wow, so we did 8 different versions of brownies today, which is a lot. I'm gonna let these all cool, and I think we're all pretty much ready to go home. So I'm gonna try them all tomorrow because I want them to all be like very room temp. Today was all about cooking through the comments, and then tomorrow I want to, take my learnings from each of these batches, cobble them all together, and really work on perfecting a recipe that I love. Wow, this looks like a stomachache waiting to happen. I already know what the original tastes like, but I kind of feel like I need the baseline just to have it. I think that brownies kind of are one of those things that gets better the second day. The flavor of this is almost a little bit more chocolatey, which I like. I think I gotta go espresso first. It's a little flatter, but there's only the addition of espresso, so it might have had something to do with bake time or something. The chocolate flavor is a lot more pronounced. And I think with all of the sugar in this recipe, that extra hit of acidity from the coffee, that kind of toasty coffee flavor, just helps cut the sugar a little bit and brings out the chocolate more. Regular cocoa, texturally, seems pretty similar, though I had extra dry ingredients in it. Definitely chocolatier. It's the teensiest bit drier. It's definitely a darker chocolate color. The brown's a little bit richer, which I like. Ah, Dutch process, yeah. I am from Holland. Isn't that weird? Name that movie, Austin Powers, gold member. My family is Dutch, so I can say it. Really nice aroma to them. Really interestingly, the regular cocoa was a little drier. This one to me is a little bit moister, and the chocolate flavor is really good with that. Even just the addition of a 1/4 cup of Dutch processed cocoa, you're getting a pretty good brownie. So we've got our flavors. Now I'm gonna go on to the texture test. So let's see, the first one is 3 eggs. So it's this one right here. Just at a glance, the 3 eggs, and this kind of makes sense, right, is the tallest of all of them. It has the most kind of like volume of ingredients in it. Like, look at just what the difference that 1 egg makes. Pretty wild. It also, this one has that very shiny top that I look for in a brownie. Definitely seems a little cakier. Interesting. There's definitely less chocolate flavor in there. I think obviously you're adding another kind of wet ingredient, so it's maybe muting the flavor. I like the height. It's not drier. It's just a little airier. So the next one I'm gonna taste is the whipped eggs. I believe that's this one. It's definitely thinner than our 3 eggs, obviously. Oh. The same flavor profile as the original. Texturally, they're not as crumbly. You know, it just feels a little bit more cohesive. This one is the substitution of half the sugar with brown sugar. See, this one has more of that crackly top as well. Wow, it's really interesting. I'm almost getting a little less of that chocolatey flavor. The texture of that is really, really good. Last test is cake flour. Now, I expect these to be pretty delicate and tender. The texture is a little less crumbly than the original, a little fudgier, more tender, pretty moist brownie too. After kind of going through and noting the really pronounced differences between all of these tests versus the original, I've kind of, you know, come to some, maybe not final conclusions, but some things that I definitely want to test out today. Addition of cocoa powder and espresso, I love. Dutch process seems like the way to go. I do feel like I want to add a little bit more egg, but I did get a little bit of a cakier consistency, so I'm trying to figure out how to mitigate that because I like how tall these are. Oh, brown sugar. I feel like maybe not a 1-to-1 brown sugar. Do y'all want to try some brownies? I want the input of my team.
Oh, that's good. Just even brown sugar and Dutch would make such a difference.
That's the texture of brownie I really want.
The brown sugar? Yeah, me too.
This is basically the version that kind of cobbles together every test that I liked. I think I'm going to add the espresso powder in this version to the chocolate. When it reacts with that heat, I do feel like it's gonna bring out some more of that aroma. This is actually the point at which I would just go ahead and add salt, just because it'll dissolve in there regardless. It's starting to get lighter in color. I feel like Miles Teller in Whiplash. All right, I'm done. So now I'm gonna just slowly pour my flour. And then I think I'm gonna just like work to fold these in. And this evened out. I mean, the other ones from yesterday, I had to smooth them out. Moving on, I have a couple things that I want to try differently here. I'm actually going to use 70% bittersweet chocolate because I think it's more widely available. I think you can get typically a higher quality chocolate at this percentage. So I'm going to add my teaspoon of espresso powder to it. Honestly, this chocolate mixture looks a lot glossier than the last one. I think it's probably because of the sugar that's present in there. I'm also gonna use an electric hand mixer because I got one. So I got my eggs there. Teaspoon of salt. Wow. I'm already basically to where I got last time. Absolutely gorgeous. Test one's out of the oven and cooled. Looks good. I really like the height. Looks a little cakey. It is cakey. I'm not out here for a cakey brownie. I don't hate that though because I like the height of it. One thing I could maybe do is actually take the pan out halfway through baking and wrap it on the counter. You know, it seems maybe a little counterintuitive to build up all that air with the eggs and then to just like kind of whack it halfway through. But it's not really like taking out a lot of the heft. It's like making the texture a little bit more closed so it's not as cakey and a little fudgier. I like the chocolate flavor though. All right, test number 2 is complete. Very interestingly, the differences between test 1 and test 2. So these were whacked halfway through basically. There's not as much height in these. Honestly, this inside, whacking that midway through baking like really does something to the texture of them. Uh-oh, this is really good. I think I want a little bit more chocolatey. I like that texture. I worry for the air bubbles. I really just don't like the air bubbles. And I know why there are air bubbles. It's because we incorporate all that air into it. Moving forward, I think I'm gonna go back down to 2 eggs. I think I'm gonna go up to a half cup of cocoa, increase the granulated sugar by a 1/4 cup. It's gonna help us get more of that shiny top. Top is so shiny. It's not bubbly like the last one. I think that's also attributed to the fact that there's no extra egg in there. There's just 2 eggs. Just looking at it, I love the cracks in it. That to me is like very brownie core. I'm feeling really good about this one. That is a brownie. They look so chocolatey and delicious. That is chocolatey. But it's so good. Y'all should try this. Amelia, come try this.
Yeah.
Gotta serve the crew. Next steps. I have this vision in my head. Triple chocolate brownies. I can see it now. This with a milk chocolate and even a white chocolate. And then I also think with that added sweetness of the milk and the white chocolate, I'm gonna need a little flaky salt on top to offset it. I think the best way of going about that, in my step where I whack it, I'll quickly sprinkle some on top so that it has a chance to still kind of set to the top in that last 10 minutes of baking, but it's not gonna dissolve into the crust itself. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, let's do it. You know what I was imagining? Is that scene in Princess Diaries when he's like, only Paolo can go from this and give you a princess. These I'm really excited about though. I loved the texture of my final test that I did before this, and basically just adding the mix-ins and adding a little bit of flaky salt on top. They look gorgeous, stunning. Like, oh my God. That is stunning. That's like triple chocolate. Realness, honey. Oh baby. That is insane. There's almost like nothing better than a warm brownie. And that salt on top is perfect. Texturally, I love these brownies. They have structure to them. You know, sometimes you get fudgy brownies that are a little too dense. These are still like so like pillowy soft to bite into. I think these are one of my favorite things I've developed. I love a brownie. Keep the comments coming. Comment below, but only nice things because I'm sensitive. You can find not only recipes, but lots of amazing comments. Some really funny, some really silly, and a lot that are very helpful over at New York Times Cooking.